Welcome to the NC Everything podcast. I'm your host, Curtis, and this is the bi-weekly show where I talk about everything that has anything to do with North Carolina. Thank you all for coming to listen. If you watched my last episode where I tried some food with my wife, that was our Tasting NC and NC Everything podcast joint show. I was really, really sick during that episode. I can't even begin to describe how miserable I felt. So I'm sorry if that episode seemed rushed. I was trying to hurry up and get through it because I felt so horrible. So I do apologize for the poor quality of that show. I am feeling a whole lot better now. I still have a little bit of cough, but I don't know what that was. Some kind of really bad chest cold. As far as the quality of episode, if you're watching on YouTube, it is freezing outside. Winter has finally arrived, so I'm indoors, and the lighting kind of sucks in here. I never bought one of those ring lights or anything like that. But anyway, outside of that, I hope you enjoy the show. One last thing before we get into it. This could be my last episode for the year. We've been really busy at work, and the holidays are coming. I may try to put together a Christmas episode, but if not, I will definitely be back first thing in January. No promises either way. We'll just have to kind of see how it goes. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the content. So today we're going to be talking about Blandwood Mansion. It's a very old house in Greensboro. And I'm not sure how long this episode is going to be, but I'm going to go through what I learned about Blandwood Mansion. So the house itself was built by Charles Bland, and that's where it gets his name. And it was built in 1795. Now, originally it was just a smaller house with 4 rooms. But only 5 years after building it, he sells it to a guy named Joseph Thornburg. And Joseph Thornburg buys it for his son, Joseph Thornburg Jr. I really couldn't find a whole lot about Joseph Thornburg, or really I couldn't find out a whole lot about Charles Bland either. But see, Joseph Thornburg owned it for 22 years, and then he sells it to Henry Humphreys. And he sells it to Henry Humphreys in 1822 for $50. Henry Humphreys, I did read a little bit more about. I may end up doing a larger episode on him, but he was like a textile mogul. He made his fortune in textile mills. But Humphreys, he expands the house from 4 rooms to 6 rooms, and it wasn't long after these renovations that he starts renting the house to his son-in-law, Governor John Motley Moorhead. And I've covered John Motley Moorhead on the Moorhead Planetarium episode, and I think he's come up in a couple other episodes. And this was 1827, by the way. 5 years after Humphreys buys the house, that's when he started renting it to Moorhead. Well, in 1844, John Motley Moorhead, he hires a New York City architect named Alexander Jackson Davis, and he really expands the house and starts adding all sorts of rooms and additions to it. And what's interesting about the house now, and because of these expansions, it says it's designed like a Tuscan villa. I said that wrong. A Tuscan villa. So, you look around at some of the typical architectural styles in the Greensboro area, or really anywhere, and then you got this, Tuscany looking house, a huge Tuscany looking house, kind of sitting here. It definitely stands out. Now, what's interesting is they got Alexander Jackson Davis to work on expanding the house. Well, then they get this guy, Andrew Jackson Downing. He worked on the landscape around the house. So now Blandwood is humongous, and it's very charming to the eye. Well, the Civil War breaks out, and during the Civil War, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard used Blandwood as his headquarters. And this wouldn't have been for the whole war, but it didn't give me a certain timeline, but definitely for part of the war, it was the headquarters of P.G.T. Beauregard. And then after the Civil War, 2 Union generals, Jacob Dolson Cox and John Schofield, they move into the house, and I would say move in. They occupy the house for a time. Now, the North Carolina governor after the Civil War, Zebulon Vance, he surrendered, because he was Confederate, and I could get into that. Maybe I should do an episode on Zebulon Vance. But he did some unsavory stuff during the Civil War, made some poor decisions. So he actually surrendered to these 2 generals in the front room of the Blandwood Mansion. So after John Motley Moorhead dies in 1866, his son Eugene moves in, and he lives there to 1874. And after Eugene moves out, his sister and brother-in-law, Emma and Julius Gray, they move into the house. Well, it says in 1900, the last members of the Moorhead family finally leave the Blandwood house. And in 1907, the house and the land around it were sold to Colonel William H. Osborne. And they decided to use this as a addiction and alcohol treatment center. There was another name for it in my notes. I can't remember what they called it back in 1907. But yeah, it's essentially a rehab. And it remained a rehab from 1907 to 1961 when Guilford College and eventually the Preservation Greensboro Incorporated decided they wanted to come in and preserve Blandwood. And they did. They came in and did some restoration, cleaned it up, made it look, I guess you wouldn't say original because originally it was a 4-bedroom house, but they got it back up to its glory. And today it's the oldest building on original foundations in Greensboro. Now, said Preservation Greensboro Incorporated, they helped with the restoration. Well, in 1966, they actually purchased the property, and they wanted to use it for a museum. And again, I've never been out there. I'm not sure if there's actually a museum there, but now the house and the 4 acres around it, it says it's kind of used as an event center. So they have parties and weddings there. They do historical events. They also have guided tours of the property. And like I said, it's an event center. If you have an idea and you got money to pay for it, I'm sure within reason they'll let you do whatever you want out at Blandwood Mansion. And again, that's a short episode. That's all I got on Blandwood. Like I said, I've never been out. It's toward Greensboro. I don't go that way a whole lot. But after reading about Blandwood, I definitely, next time we're in Guilford County, I would definitely seek it out and try to put my eyes on it. Maybe it's overrated. Maybe it's underrated. I wouldn't go by my podcast, though. If you get around Guilford County, head out there and find out for yourself. Anyway, that is all I got. Again, this may be my last episode of the year, but the year ain't got that much left. It won't be long before I'm back again. And maybe I'll start next year off with a murder. I got a lot of murder notes saved up, and I don't want to dump all this murder on people at one time. But anyway, if you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube and you'd rather just listen instead of watch, I can be found on most podcast players. Spotify is the biggest one, I think, or Apple Podcasts. I think I don't have Apple products, but I think Apple Podcasts is pretty big. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts and you rather watch or want to put a face to the voice, I can be found on YouTube. There'll be a link for the YouTube in the description below. And the last thing I want to say is Facebook. I'm not going to be one of those guys where I'm giving up on Facebook. I'm going underground and I'm going off grid. I'm certainly not going off grid, but I have decided to take a break from Facebook. My page is still there, and I'll leave a link to the Facebook group there. If you're on Facebook, definitely check it out, and fans of the show can chat amongst each other. And I'm still checking in, but after the contentious election, Facebook's always been a nasty-ass place, but really after the election, just bad people are all over Facebook. And, I find that I open up Facebook to cure some boredom. I got 10 minutes. I'm waiting on my wife. I'll scroll Facebook and I find that I end up very depressed and angry or annoyed or just sad at how people are, how people treat each other. Anyway, I'm not trying to go on a bandwagon here, but my presence on Facebook is definitely limited. I think I've been on twice in the past 14 days. But anyway, you enjoy Facebook. I'm not judging anybody. Please don't judge me. Thank you all for listening. And normally I'll say I'll talk to you in a couple weeks, but I'll talk to you next time.